Welcome to Off Meta Analysis, where I take new ideas that aren't currently being used in the meta and analyze their potential, featuring Devious. In my Kirolen video, I mentioned that I hated its abilities because it's so RNG based. Like with Territorial, it's dependent on the opposing Loomian's gender, which is randomized for the most part, and for Hasty, it's hit or miss. Like if you hit your move, then it'll deal a lot of damage, but if you don't, then you're not going to do any damage at all. But a lot of you guys mentioned that I should have ran Devious on my Kirolen, and there's actually a reason why I didn't run Devious on Kirolen. It's not that I think that Devious is a bad ability. I think it's a really good ability. I just don't think that it's great at the moment, since there are very few abilities in the game where Devious benefits from, but I think it'll get better as more abilities are introduced in the future. So that's what today's video is for. I'm going to be analyzing Devious and checking out which Loomians benefit from it. The wiki's description of Devious is that any ability of the target or targets that may take effect upon being attacked will be ignored. However, this does not ignore statistic modifiers that apply to the opposing Loomian due to the cause of an ability, for example resilience, or any effects after attack, for example sharp edges. So first of all, let's take a look at Kirolen. It bypasses hard candy and trash armor, which means that it's going to deal more damage to Garbantis and Spreezy than it would if their hard candy and trash armor abilities were still there. It also bypasses Staunch, but it's kind of meh for Kirolen since its main stat lowering move is Dawdle, but Kirolen is not going to be running Dawdle. It's going to be running things like Fire Slam, Adaptive Assault, Rough Up, and maybe Stretch. So it's not really that beneficial that Kirolen bypasses Staunch. It also bypasses Combustible and Raging Fire, but that's also meh for Kirolen because its fire type move is Fire Slam, and the Loomians with Combustible and Raging Fire are either pure fire or part fire, so they're going to be resisting fire moves anyway. Kirolen also bypasses Tank, so it's going to deal more damage to things like Ursnag and Diborg with Tank. It also bypasses Sly, which is Metatoad's secret ability, so if Kirolen's running an Essence or Power Cuffs, its damage output will still take into account its Essence and Power Cuffs, whereas if it were another Loomian without Devious, then its Power Cuffs and Essences would be completely ignored when attacking Sly Metatoad. Kirolen also bypasses Aqua Body, but like with Combustible and Raging Fire, the Loomians with Aqua Body are water type, so they're going to be resisting Fire Slam anyways. Kirolen also bypasses Enchanted Coat, so it won't take reduced effect when attacking Cosmiore. Finally, Kirolen bypasses Regift, but like I said before, Kirolen is not really going to be running Dawdle, so there's no point in bypassing Regift. Next we have Venolen, and it's one of the better abusers of Devious. It bypasses Toxic Filter, which means that its Toxic type moves bypass Stratushore's Toxic Filters, so things like Poison and Adaptive Assault will bypass it. It also bypasses Staunch, so Charade will bypass Staunch, but most Staunch users, or I think pretty much all Staunch users, are Earth type, so Venolen does not want to stay in on a Loomian with Staunch since Venolen's weak to Earth type. So once Venolen uses Charade and a Staunch user switches in, Venolen has to switch right out unless Venolen somehow outspeeds the Staunch user and the Staunch user is low in health. Venolen also bypasses Slick Shell, so it's going to be dealing more damage to secret ability Terra Claw. It also bypasses Coursing Venom, but it doesn't really benefit from bypassing Coursing Venom because that's Swolder's secret ability, and Swolder's part poison, so it resists poison and is also immune to poison. Venolen also bypasses Tank, so it's going to be dealing more damage to Diborg with Mud Spatter. Venolen also bypasses Sly, but it's not really going to benefit too much from it since Venolen's not going to be running Essence or Power Cuff unless you're a secret ability Venolen and offensive Venolen. But if you're not, then you're going to be running Health Amulet or Heavy Shackles or even Heavy Shield, so you're not really going to benefit from ignoring Sly. Venolen also bypasses Regift, so its Poison will bypass it, and so will its Charade. And now next up we have Garlash. Garlash bypasses Total Eclipse, but it's meh for Garlash because Garlash deals more damage to Eclipse with Vicious Snap than it does with Mega Chomp. Garlash also bypasses Hard Candy, but even though it bypasses Hard Candy, that means that Spreezy removes its water weakness, and Garlash's Vicious Snap won't be dealing as much damage to it. But Garlash bypasses trash armor, so that means its attacks will be doing more damage to Garbantus. Garlash bypasses Staunch, but like with Kirolen, Garlash is not going to be running a stat lowering move. It's going to be running things like Provoke, 3 damage moves, sometimes even Stretch. Garlash bypasses Tank, so it's going to be dealing more damage to things like Diborg, Mutagon, Ursnack, etc. It also bypasses Sly, so its power cups and essences are going to be taken into account when dealing damage. Garlash also bypasses Enchanted Coat, so it doesn't care about reduced damage when attacking Cosmiore. And finally, Garlash also bypasses Regift, so its Provoke will bypass the Regift. Some abilities that are bypassable but no Loomian benefits from at the moment are things like Flutter, since no Loomian with Devious has any powder moves. There's also Woodsman and Nauseous Weeds. No Loomian with Devious has any grass type moves. There's also Lightning Rod and Rechargeable. No Loomians with Devious has any electric type moves. There's also Prismatic. No Loomians with Devious has any light type moves. And then there's Immunize, which is Gobidemic's ability, and no Loomian with Devious benefits from bypassing this because the only status move that any Devious Loomian has is Poison, which Venolen has, and Gobidemic's already immune to that. And other than that, there's no other status move that Devious Loomians have, like Hypnotize and stuff like that. So it doesn't really benefit from bypassing Immunize at the moment. Some abilities that I'm unsure about are things like Vigilant, Compliant, Guardian, and Communication, which are doubles abilities, but I think Devious doesn't bypass those abilities because they are for the ally rather than the user itself. I'm also unsure if Devious bypasses Clingy or Clutch, but I think it doesn't bypass it since it's an effect that happens right after a move is used. I'm not sure if Devious bypasses Protective Shell, but I think it does because the critical hits are taken into account when the attack is happening rather than after the attack. For Ungracious Host, there's no real way of testing it unless you talent trade a Terrafly with Paratize or Cephalops with Soul Drain, stuff like that. So I'm not really sure if Devious bypasses it, but I think it doesn't bypass Ungracious Host because it's an effect that happens right after the attack. I'm also unsure if Devious bypasses Confidence, which is an ability that makes it immune to flinching, but I think it does bypass Confidence. Finally, I'm unsure about Anomaly since it's a stat modifying ability, but I don't think Devious bypasses it. But yeah, at the moment there are only 3 fully evolved Loomians with Devious, but there are other ways of giving Loomians Devious, such as Surrogate, Ability Thief, Talent Trade, and Replicate. The easiest way to get Devious out of these 4 is Surrogate, and the only 2 Loomians with Surrogate at the moment are Dorogo and Cosmiore. I personally think that Dorogo is one of the best abusers of Devious because it gets access to Poison Barbs. So it bypasses Toxic Filter and Regift, which means that it's guaranteed to get its Poison Barbs down. And the only way to remove the Poison Barbs are either having a Toxic type Loomian to remove them or using Burn Up or Gust. On top of that, Dorogo also bypasses things like Tank, Enchanted Coat, and stuff like that, so it's going to be dealing more damage than usual to those Loomians. For Cosmiore, it doesn't really benefit from Devious as much as Dorogo does, but nonetheless, it gives it greater damage potential against things with Trash Armor, Hard Candy, Enchanted Coat, Tank, etc. So not including Surrogate, Ability Thief, Talent Trade, and Replicate, I think Venolen is one of the best Devious users in the game, but with Surrogate, Dorogo would probably be the best Devious user in the game right now. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.